So I'm super excited to be quizzing Susan today. Susan Bradley is currently the Product and Campaign Development Manager at Sue Ryder, but formerly she was the Head of Public Fundraising at Children First, which is where we supported her and what we're going to be talking about today. And yeah, she's been an absolute joy to work with. She continues to be, and I can't wait for you to hear from her all her learnings because I think it's great. I'm sure most of you have spoken at some point with Julia and myself, and we can tell you, like, here's how other people have done it, here's what the recommendations are, here's what the books say. It's so powerful to hear it from somebody personally and someone who's been on that journey. So thank you so much for being here and for sharing your experience with us, Susan. I wanted to start off, would you just tell us a little bit about your background, and then what were you doing at Children First? What was the challenge or opportunity that you had that made you think, right, there's something to be done here?
Of course. Well, first of all, thank you very much for inviting me to come along. It's a real pleasure to talk about the work that we did jointly together. And yeah, it's a pleasure to meet everyone who's around the table. And it's really great and insightful to hear what you're trying to get out of today, what the learnings are. That's really great to see. I think 67% of you were looking at agile ways of working. And it's great that you've said that, because it's something that I'm trying to do at Sue Ryder as well. But of course, agile is a bit of a buzzword just now. What you need to kind of develop underneath that is, what is that? And what does that need to look like for your organisation? But we'll come on to that. But that was really insightful. So thanks very much for taking part in that. So I'm Susan Bradley. I'm the Products and Campaigns Development Manager at Sue Ryder. So I've been at Sue Ryder since mid-May, and prior to that, I was the Head of Public Fundraising at Children First. So I was there for 6 years. First started out a role in Regional Community Fundraising Manager, and then developed throughout the years to becoming Head of Public Fundraising. So my background prior to that was in community fundraising management roles or community fundraiser roles. One of the joys that I really got from my job was really going out and speaking to people. And I thought that that's where my love for fundraising would always lie. Going out to a ladies' guild was something that I absolutely adored. When I previously worked at Erskine, I loved taking people around in tours and having that one-on-one contact with people. But as my approach to fundraising developed, so did where I felt as if I got the most joy out of fundraising. And when we were working on the agile working process with Eleanor, probably about 2 years ago now, that's where I found out actually I really like looking at things and getting curious about things and developing them and testing new ideas with the safety to test and safety of knowing that when things go wrong, they still give you a learning that you can implement and use that's valuable as when things go right. So that's kind of briefly about my background. And when during my time at Children First, community fundraising had been evolving for quite some time. So we were previously known as the RSSPCC. Gary's probably chuckling just now because there's not a minute that I talk about Children First, but I always mention that. And the reason I mention that is because the charity was established in the 1800s, and it kept that name right up until the mid-1990s. So still, when people from Children First were going out and speaking to the public, they might have not known the new name, but they would have referred to of the old name. But we had quite a strong connection through the years with local communities. So community fundraising had evolved into having fundraising groups, or action groups as they'd called them. And unfortunately, over the last maybe 15 to 20 years, they were declining in numbers. So when I had first started, I was just the fundraising manager for the south of Scotland, and my colleague managed the community fundraising approach in the north of Scotland. Now, at that point, there was no joined up approach, so there was no kind of blanket approach to mail-ins, contact, messaging, how we approach things. And when the organisation just wasn't structured for it, it wasn't a conscious decision, it was just inherited ways of working. When they had moved on, we looked at merging the two teams together into the one team. And I did a bit of research with all the action groups that we had at the time. And in 10 years prior to that, so in 2007, we had 38 action groups bringing on an average about £13,500 per year. Fast forward 10 years later, we had that reduced to 18 action groups bringing on average £8,500 per year. So you could see where things were going. There was so much time, effort and energy put into trying to continue our action groups on and grow them. But I mean, that research alone, kind of that insight tells you that that wasn't a sustainable way to grow community fundraising. So then we looked into various approaches. We merged all the fundraising teams, we centralised them as well. And we looked into what kind of provision that we were giving out. There was no fundraising product that was owned by Children First. When we were asking people to fundraise, it was third party, effectively their ideas, or it was challenge event-based activities. And one thing we started knowing about the challenge event-based activities, people were coming to us because we were offering free places or lower cost entry places than other charities. So it wasn't necessarily the charity that they were connecting with us with, it was more the product that were connecting us with. So they wanted to do the London Marathon and they were looking for a charity, and we were the one that they selected, or that they applied for and they get accepted, or they were wanting to do the Great Scottish Run, and again our kind of entry level was lower than maybe what another charity was. So the inspiration was a product rather than the cause. And also another side of that is there was very little understanding of who our audiences were or are. We constantly looked at action groups for knowledge and understanding about our audiences. But actually that's who our audiences were, and they weren't growing in number. There was a whole audience that we didn't really know enough information about. So we knew that we had to look at our audiences to figure out who are our new and emerging audiences and what products might we be able to make for them in order to approach them. It's an interesting, it worked really, really well, and that's how we were able to go through the sprint work with Eleanor. But it's an interesting approach when I'm looking at Sue Ryder as well, because there's a lot of products there that have been created because they've been inherited over the years. But I'm just wondering now, because of the branding that Sue Ryder has really stretched over the last 18 months with a brand new national service of bereavement support. So therefore our brand audience is stretched, and I'm just wondering how many audiences within that stretch that we're not actually catering for. So we are probably going to be looking at very shortly an audience and a product analysis where we'll overlap them, find out where the gaps are, and then build backwards a product to support them. So it's nice to see the work that we did with Tilt kind of continuing on with Sue Ryder. But back to what we were using with Children First. During the time that we were looking at things and reviewing things and recognising more about our audience, we had a new strategy brought in that we were all a part of. So the previous strategy was given to us to deliver upon, but the Inspire fundraising strategy, we were all part of its creation. And so because we were part of the creation, everybody was invested in it. Everyone really understood what was required of them in order to deliver on the strategy. And it was really, really clear for us to see. So with that, it was the whole team ownership, and the people were invested in the outcomes. So we knew that there was many audiences that we didn't have products for. And we also were able to really look at what we wanted to do. We wanted to inspire our audiences because it was part of our strategy at the time. We got fantastic results with going through the agile process with Tilt. The end result was having 200 supporters that we were able to contact, and also we opened up a previously untapped audience where there was inherited expectation that we couldn't contact families that were supported by Children First. But actually that's where we've seen the biggest rise in the number of sign-ups, was via the services and the families who wanted to do something. So we definitely achieved our aim that we set out at the very beginning.
Thanks, Susan. And it was given how interested everybody is here on like agile ways of working, what's interesting is that you're here in Susan's introduction, nowhere there did she say we wanted to work in an agile way. That wasn't the driver. The driver was something as it often is for us in charities, was something around income for children first, but it is often around an outcome that you want to achieve. So that's something really helpful to notice, that although what we managed to achieve was a team that then really understood how to work in an agile way, were really excited about it, bought in and could start doing it elsewhere, they did that through building a new product iteratively. And I'm not even sure how much we used the words agile as we were working with the team. Not a huge amount, I imagine, Susan, because it was more like, here's the next step, here's the next step, let's reflect on what we're doing. So we were kind of building those principles of focusing on user needs, regular reflection, building step by step, and just making it part of what we were doing, rather than really pushing the jargon, the steps, the rules, etc.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. I don't think we used agile as a terminology an awful lot, but that's absolutely the way that we were working. The whole point was that we had a purpose, we had an outcome that we wanted to achieve, we had a problem, and that we needed a solution to the problem, and an agile process just so happened to be the way that we tackled it. That was the kind of framework that we used in order to get to there, but it was all about the purpose, it was all about the problem. So I'm seeing a few comments coming up to say, this is what we want to do. That's great, you know what you want to do, you know where to get there, and it's about the process that you want to implement to achieve your purpose.
Exactly, yeah. And so what we came in as Tilt to do was to support you to develop this new product in an iterative way. So what that means is, rather than squirreling away, coming up with your best guess behind the scenes and then launching it to your supporters, instead we were supporting you to build it step by step, regularly test it with users, de-risk it, increase your confidence step by step by building in real research from the people that you were aiming it at. So I wonder, could you tell us what was the first? I know you've kind of broken it down really clearly into 3 key steps, Susan. How did you, and the first is prepare. Can you tell us a bit more about how you prepared for this work?
Sure. So the first thing we had to decide on was preparing the group who were going to be part of the project group to take this forward. And the key thing for that group was having really clearly defined roles and a really clear defined purpose for each person to come to that table with. So we had a facilitator, which was Eleanor, who did an excellent job of guiding us through the process. We had a decider, who was Gary, who's on the call with us today as Director of Fundraising, and a new approach like that was the most appropriate person for us to have as decider. We had 2 audience experts, so people who knew the audience that we were trying to reach out to. And that was myself as head of public fundraising and our senior community fundraiser at the time. We had a representative from data team. So we had our database manager. We had a representative from the marketing and comms team, which was really, really beneficial, because at that time market and comms sat outside fundraising, so we're 2 different teams with 2 different priorities. Often when we were trying to deliver on general work, having someone from marketing and comms in that group from the very beginning with a very clear outline of what time commitment we wanted from them and what we were looking for them to bring to that meeting automatically made sure that we had early buy-in from internal stakeholders within the organisation, which was really, really crucial. Sometimes if you get different priorities and you're looking to test something, but you haven't involved marketing and comms, and if your test is going to be on digital based or maybe on social media like ours was, that's going to be tricky because you're coming at the last minute, they've already got priorities in. But if you've got someone from marketing and comms in earlier, then it was much easier for us as well. And it really did elevate our work. Their suggestions, their thoughts, their ideas really did hone in the purpose and how things were looking as we put them out externally for testing. And then the last person we had in the group was someone who was going to challenge our process and our thoughts. Now, for us, the challenger was our trust fundraising manager, because they weren't necessarily daily working with the processes of community or events. So it was really, really good to have that kind of perspective, someone who was curious and really challenges to ask questions and coming to the table with these, but why, I don't get it moments. Now, sometimes they're incredibly helpful, but sometimes those questions were maybe framed around the process itself. So quite a lot that we had to say, actually, we don't have an answer just now for that because it's about the process and we've just got to trust the process. We had to remind ourselves of that a lot, which was really helpful. And we were doing something that we had never done before. So there's an element of trying to get comfortable with the uncomfortable, because we were moving at a pace that we had never moved with before in terms of decision making, coming up with ideas. I remember walking away from one of these sessions thinking, wow, we made a decision there in 6 minutes that would sometimes take 6 hours for people to make, because you go into things in detail and you think about all these what if moments, but in an agile process, the actual framework itself doesn't allow for all these what if. It's just putting things all to the side. And Jennifer, to see your question there, no, we didn't actually have a representative from service delivery. It's not to say for the right products that we couldn't, but for this, for our first time, we felt as if these particular roles, the decider, 2 people who knew the audience, marketing and comms, the challenger, might be a suitable role for someone that's maybe with the service delivery element of side of things as well, and data. We felt as if those key 6 roles needed to be someone that was really linked every day to that kind of role, and they were able to bring in their teams as well into that. So yeah, leave your what if colleagues at home. They might hold you back a little bit. People try to be helpful every step of the way, but yeah, you just kind of got to go with the flow sometimes. And it's really helpful to always have the audience in mind. Sometimes I can sit around a room or a virtual room and people are giving us their opinion on the product or an activity. Sometimes you have to kind of challenge that a little bit to say, but are you the audience that this has been created in mind of? You're giving us your opinion, and it strikes me as, is it professional, is it personal, or is it with the audience based in mind? You really need to remind yourself of that. I might not like it, but just because I don't like it doesn't mean the audience might not like it because I'm not the audience. So we had to remind ourselves of that quite a lot. So that was the first step of the process, was preparing, getting the right group together, getting the right people around the table, making it absolutely clear what you were asking of them as well, and then starting from there. So that was the first step. With that, we developed more into understanding more about our audience, who the audience were. And with this, we did 12 interviews with our typical audience type. And because of the type of product we were creating, it was those hand raisers, those people for third-party events who were already coming to us. They were coming to us because we were the cause and they had decided what to do. So we wanted to go out to them to say, right, okay, who are you? Like, what do you know about Children First? What was your motivation? What do you already know about us? What would you like to take part in if we offered to you? So we did a real thorough interview process with them, which was incredibly insightful. We learned an awful lot during that. And we got to understand them a great deal with that. So that was the next part of the process before we even started deciding ideas. Sometimes when people are thinking about, let's devise a new product, they talk about ideas already. We could do this, we could do this would be really, really fun. But actually investing that time early on and getting the right team and really getting to understand who the audience are that you're trying to reach out to, with what is the problem that we're trying to solve. Those are the key foundations for going forward for any kind of agile process.
Thanks, Susan. Reflecting on what might be most useful for you all here in the room today is what's exciting about starting in this really focused way, as Susan's describing, is that, I don't know if you found this, like trying to get together a working group, it was really specific. What Susan and Gary were asking was individual people to come together for a specific amount of time to deliver a specific product for, now, as she said, a specific audience. It was quite clear about how much time would be involved, what the outcome would be, what some outputs might look like. and why these individual people would be involved. So it was an easier ask than going in and saying, hey, we're going to set up an agile team to deliver this massive thing. Don't know when it's going to start, don't know when it's going to end. That's a much bigger ask. So it was a great way to start things off by saying to folks, come and get involved in this exciting new way of working to deliver this specific thing. It was very obvious why a cross-functional team was needed, because, as Susan said, having an individual in the room to play a particular role or bring a particular skill set was exactly what was needed. And it was easy to make the link between, oh yeah, if we're going to build a new fundraising product, of course we need someone from the comms team there, where maybe they wouldn't normally be involved this early in building something. So if you're thinking of starting to embed agile ways of working in your organization or in your team, it's a great thing to start off by thinking, how can we start small with a specific thing that we want to deliver, because that's an easier ask and it helps you to be more focused. Think about what has a good chance of succeeding. Do you have decision makers who are like Gary, who are like, yes, I'm open to new ways of working, let's test, let's explore. Something that can be delivered by a small core team of about 5, maximum 8 people. If it's a massive project that you need everyone from 20 different teams across the organization is super complex, don't start there. You want a team that can self-organize and proactively solve problems. That both comes from, I guess, the approach of the people in the team, but also the leadership around them. Are they enabled to do that? And somewhere where you can just get started. Is there some urgency there? Is there a real need? So all of those things were pointing us at Children First towards the thinking about this product, community fundraising product. The other thing that I just wanted to pull out in terms of what was important in terms of pulling together this cross-functional team that will be useful for you to think about when you're pulling together a cross-functional team to have a go at agile working is you want the skills, knowledge and power to deliver this specific work from beginning to end to be in that room or in that group. It should be the people who are doing the work, not the people who are overseeing it. You don't want, it's often rather than managers, it will be the people who are doing the work. And that will be doing the work from seeing it through from beginning to end is really important, as well as this team did, which Susan will talk you through shortly. So Susan, you had the right people in the room, you'd done some research done some user interviews, which I remember, as you said, were super insightful, which gave you through which you built a proto persona of the audience that you were aiming at. What did you do next?
Well, once we did that, that's when we got in a room with each other, and that's when we came up with ideas. We reminded ourselves about our audience. We readjusted the problem again. We just referred back to it just to remind ourselves of that. And I think Paul's put a comment, was it the classic 5-day blocking out calendars for a week? It wasn't in this case. It wasn't. It was during lockdown. It was during COVID. So we did 2 virtual sessions for about 3 hours each, 2 to 3 hours. We did 1 full day session where we generated the ideas and we come up with that. And then afterwards we had, I think, another 1 session to refine the idea and to discuss how we were going to test it. And then afterwards we had some coaching sessions. So it wasn't the 5-day full week. I'm trying to explore it, Zoraida, just now 2 different versions of Sprint and Agile. One will be the full-on 5-day blocking out of calendars and working out a full template for that. But the other one is what I'm calling at the moment is Sprint Light. And I'm devising it because there's already a product that we have that's really, really, it is good, but there's so much more that we could be doing with it. And it's a bit overwhelming actually, because there's so many opportunities, but we have to have a real cultural shift in a few places in order to get the maximum opportunity out of it. So I don't think that needs a full 5 days. I think it needs 5 sessions. It may be 2 or 3 hours each done virtually, because I think you can make just as much progress virtually as you can in a room with people, probably a bit faster and more leaner, just because the experience that I have of using this in an agile way. So Paul, I hope that helps and answers your question. There's some great books to refer to. There's the book Sprint. I don't know if anyone's ever come across this. I've got it to hand just now. I've got all my books to hand. How to solve big problems and test new ideas in just 5 days. That is your standard 5-day block booking out. But try and find a way that maybe a slimmer version, start small, as Eleanor was saying, start in a lighter way, be really, really clear about the problem and the outcomes that you're trying to have, and then work through it to try and get less time intensive or time commitment from people around the table, and then think big, then go big with that. So try and get stakeholder involvement by introducing it that way first of all. Sorry, I just wanted to kind of touch on that before we moved on. So the day that we all got together was really, really good. This is where we come up with ideas. And the process was, again, a very, very agile thinking process. We had to write down 8 ideas of fundraising ideas of what this product could look like. And then we had to whittle it down and whittle it down and whittle it down throughout the day. And that was really, really difficult because we were introducing really complex questions like, how will people raise money for that? Is that a sponsored event? Are people paying to? You don't need to answer that just now. It's not about that. It's just choosing the activity to suit the audience, choosing the activity to suit the problem and the purpose. You can talk about the fundraising mechanisms later or down the line, which is something that we were really keen on. So we did that, and then we moved into choosing our finalised product, which was a treasure hunt stroke scavenger hunt. It was a scavenger hunt that we chose. And the problem was that we wanted an activity where families could do together. So we didn't have a product where families could do together, and that was the problem we were trying to solve, a fundraising product that families could do together. So then the idea that we had was the scavenger hunt, and then we looked at testing our assumptions. Now, testing assumptions has been one of the biggest bugbears that I've kind of come across, because this is when people bring in their own opinions of that won't work because we tried that a few years ago, that won't work because that audience don't respond in that way. One of the phrases, and I know someone on the call is probably going to giggle just now when I say this, is to respond to someone saying, is that a tested assumption? Have we tested that assumption to make sure that that's true and correct and viable? And we did it on a graph where we took all the assumptions that we had and we plotted it into a graph into what was easiest to find out and what was the most important that had the biggest impact to the fundraising activity that we had. With that, we were really, really clear in what assumption we should be testing first of all. So what was the easiest to find out versus what had the biggest impact on the product. And we just worked back from there about the testing that we should do. So the first assumption that we had was that people wanted to do the activity for the charity versus the product. So was it the product or the cause? Similar to kind of the previous chat that I was talking about, is people were getting in touch with Children First because they wanted to do the product rather than do something for the charity. So we tested that through social media by smoke testing. And we presented the product as if it was a product that was up and running, where we asked people to sign up for the product. And that was against some people's comfort zones, because they were getting asked lots of questions like, but what will we do if someone gets in touch and they want to do the scavenger hunt next week? Well, we can explain to them. You just have that relational conversation with people about, this is a process that we're going through just now. We're designing it. Do you want to be part of that? Can we chat? Because with that, we had set a clear guidance of the amount of people that were wanting to hear back from that. So it was click-through rates. When we had the social media testing out, we had a graphic that advertised the scavenger hunt with the Children First logo, and then we tested that versus the same identical thing without the Children First logo, and we tested to see what had the most click-through rates, what had the most engagement, and we compared that with each other. And the result from that was by far that people were coming back or wanting to get involved with the scavenger hunt. It was the product rather than wanting to do something for the charity, and it just so happened to be the scavenger hunt that was a product that was more suited to them. So that was a really clear test for us. So we knew that we had to invest time in making the product attractive, making sure it met the needs of the audience, rather than relying, come and do this for us, which was really, really helpful. So, and then from there, we went to the next test as well, and then the next test after that to really, really refine and learn the outcomes. I think the next test we did that after that was, is a digital map better than a physical map? We assumed that online would be absolutely the most preferred method for the activity, but the result we got back from that was people didn't really care. They were quite happy with a physical map or a physical thing to take. So we invested more time in creating the physical pack for it. So we had the scavenger hunt pack printed off, and we had a frame as well, because social media was really, really important for this audience. So we had a scavenger hunt frame that people could take a picture of themselves with the scavenger hunt logo, and we developed it from there on. So that was the next part of the process. It was the bit that people think that you just start with is coming up with ideas, and it's really not. That second stage, and then going on to test the ideas from there on afterwards. And if you're able to do that, by the time you deliver something to market, the chances of success are much higher than if you have an idea and just put it out there to see what happens with it, because you've already tested assumptions, you've already took some baby steps in order to refine and develop on what the finished outcome is going to look like.
So great to hear you talk through those tests, Susan, because again, that's something that I think when we're talking with teams and organizations about starting to work in a more agile way, this aspect particularly of kind of making decisions based on evidence learned from your users, from putting something valuable in front of your users, can feel really scary, especially when you're working in our sector where our relationship and our reputation with the folks that we support and get money from is really important. So what was really exciting about starting the work at Children First with this kind of extended design sprint focusing on a product is that it created an opportunity where, of course, we needed to find out quickly what the audience wanted. It was kind of a given. It created the urgency and the space to quickly learn about what the audience wanted. You've only got your 5 to 8 people in the room. You can't go off and ask so-and-so what they think. You can't get feeding from 20 people. You've just got to go. Well, that was certainly the role that Julia and I played, was right. You've got 2 weeks. What experiment can you run? And that urgency really creates the environment for folks to collaborate, come up with an experiment which will give them some useful learnings so that they can start to build the product or idea iteratively. So again, that's something to bear in mind if you're starting to think about how can we kickstart agile ways of working, is focusing on building something where you have to get, it's really important to get, that is risky and unknown, whether that's because you've got a new audience, a new product, or both in Children First's case. That high risk environment creates the need for the team to really live that agile value of engaging with their users and learning from them. So I know you ran multiple tests, one after the other, and built up your idea of what the product should look like. Could you tell us a little bit more about what the final product was and how it performed?
Yeah, sure. So the final product was a scavenger hunt that people could take part in. We had spoken about doing treasure hunts in cities and all over, but then we're looking at the restrictions that they would have. So a scavenger hunt was something that people could take part in. Now, at the same time, separately to the sprint work that we were doing, we were kind of approaching the second phase of a sub-brand that we were using for challenge events, which was branded as Let the Kids Win. And the idea for that would be, if you take part in a race or a marathon, we're not expecting you to come first. Taking part, by taking part in fundraising, you're letting the kids win. So it was a really, really great slogan. Used messaging toolkit for our challenge events. It fit really, really well. But as we started to explore further what the scavenger hunt could look like on delivery, we thought, well, if this is something that families are going to do together, you could do an adult versus kids element to the scavenger hunt and have a competition going between them. But with the slogan of Let the Kids Win, i.e. step back, make sure the kids come out on top. So then the result of that would mean that the adults would have to take part in some kind of forfeit or challenge, which would be where the fundraising element came in. So they would have to do like a 5K, sponsored 5K, or with loads of suggestions for them to take part in. So we were able to refine that, and we came up with a pack based on the physical element of what we knew people would like. It was great that we were able to tie it in, so there was some real consistency that we didn't expect to happen with our challenge event sub-brand. And when we were able to deliver that out, we again, we were just kind of coming out of a lockdown at that point as well. COVID was the #1 news item on the news. So it was something that people could do local to them, where they had a list of things that they had to go out and find and tick off. And we gave that out, and we were really blown away with the response when we gave it out, so much so that after I think a couple of days we had to go back and do an ordered reprint of the amount of materials that we had. So I think we hoped for 50 people to sign up, or 50 sign-ups, and at one point I think we even got above 30 sign-ups from the one service that we had. So straight away we were recognising that this is a product that's working with the audience that we maybe didn't intend to reach out to, and that was the families who come to Children First to work alongside to gain support. It was an instant hit. So we were getting people calling up and saying, have you got more packs? Have you got this? Have you got that? We're looking for this amount. So we had to make sure that we were catering for the public audience as well as catering for the internal audience as well. And we were really stunned. We used Microsoft Teams, and it was amazing getting like updates, daily updates. There was a real buzz about it, about who's going to get the reprint out. This is great. We've got another X amount of orders from this service and other people from this service, and it was fantastic. So the end up result was that we were able to capture a consent for 200 participants who were taking part. So that's not one person, that's 200 families, 200 requests for packs that we were able to get from that. So that was way beyond our expectations. And I think the absolute key for that was being absolutely everyone around that table understanding what the purpose was, understanding clearly what the problem was, and having a shared voice into the output of it. That was fundamental to its success. And yeah, a scavenger hunt was such a great tool to engage with so many new audiences that we were able to then work in a supporter journey with, to take with us, to stay with us, to understand more and learn more about Children First. Because if they came to us because of the product, we understood as well that we had to talk to them more about the work that we do as well to keep engaged with them thereafter.
So wicked to hear the success of the product, the idea, also that it kind of blew out the water a fairly well-established assumption within Children First that there wasn't value, and perhaps it wasn't right to be fundraising from approaching the families that Children First support for fundraising, and actually it blew that assumption out the water. And that it, I guess, showed agile ways of working differently in action, and how it can produce a really valuable product, but also is starting to change assumptions within the organization. And I wonder if could you say a little bit more about what wider changes you saw or happened after you'd kind of finished the work and the product was out there?
Yeah, I think one of the key things after that was understanding that this was a process that worked incredibly well for us, and that we wanted our director of fundraising, Gary, was really wanting to invest in this style of working. There was a lot of investment as part of our strategy in training, and this was another element of it as well. We were looking for more opportunities to ingrain this way of working, so much so that there was actually a role created for products and designing new products, which was really, really key for us to take forward. So that was really great for Children First. This almost kind of tested the water to say something new and different does and can work with the right process and with the right plans in place and with the setting of the right problem. And again, it really harnessed a lot of connection with the services as well, because they got so excited about a fundraising venture because they felt as if it had done with their audience in mind. It just so it just so happened that it overlapped with the audience that we were trying to reach out to, which was really good. So it was definitely instilled a different way of thinking for us all, because afterwards we were all talking about, have we tested that assumption? We were asking lots of questions. Are we clear about what we're trying to achieve? And we were very, yeah, it was almost like someone earlier on asked about a cultural change. You can't change culture by coming in one day and say we're going to change culture. It's about those little moments of inspiration, of new ways of thinking, of new ways of working, and how people are willing to challenge other people and add value through an agile process that we learned, whilst not actually saying that it was an agile process, to embed it in that way.
Thanks, Susan. And I know before you shared with me some kind of top tips for folks if they're thinking of kickstarting agile ways of working, through perhaps doing a design sprint, or through coming up with a new idea, bringing together that small cross-functional team and testing your way towards delivering it. What pearls of wisdom do you have for folks as they embark on this journey?
That's helpful. The first one maybe is, don't do it alone. Don't have all the pressure on your shoulders. It can be really, really difficult. At Children First, we were in a unique position where the senior leadership were already on board with trying and testing new things. This was something that our director wanted to try and test and build in. But I can imagine with other people in other organisations that influence is maybe coming from more operational staff and trying to influence upwards. So the best piece of advice for those type of people is get advice. Don't do it alone. Get a plan, a suggested plan, and then run it past someone. Book some time in with Eleanor, 45 minutes of her time, running past what are the key objectives that you're trying to do. Where are your problems? Where are your barriers? Where are your challenges? And plan for those. So have a first session with Tilt, and then scale up from there. Because of that session we were able to do at Children First, they're able to develop on those ways of working as well. Because I was part of that process, that I'm able to embed many of those ways of working at Surider, but also recognise that just because we did it that way doesn't mean that's the exact template that we have to use at Surider. And that's why I'm looking into testing 2 different templates, like the full 5-day traditional, let's create something from scratch, and the amendment one, where we're trying to make a change to something. So first thing, seek advice. Speak to someone that's been through a process like that. Speak to Eleanor, get some of her time. Be careful about the people that you're trying to get around the room. Think really thoroughly around that. I can't remember if someone mentioned it, or if it was Ellen, or if it was a question. Don't go too strategic with the people that you're having in the room. Get more operational based staff there, but make sure that you get the investment from your senior leadership team, that the commitment is there to roll this out. I was speaking to someone last week and we were talking about, well, what commitment has Surider got to do this? And I guess the response was like, I'm here doing this role in order to be able to roll this out. That's the commitment we've got. We've got the time, the space. We just need to create more of it. So, but when it comes to the actual working group, make sure that there's more operational staff. Make sure it's absolutely someone who speaks to the audience on a regular basis, doesn't just know them from a distance, people that are actually engaging with them all the time. So get those either 5 to 8 individuals, get them seen as early adopters. Another one, a tip that we get, is get comfortable with the uncomfortable. You will probably move at a pace that you feel as if is uncomfortable for you. That's okay. You will probably be making decisions without being really thought through, particularly when it comes to, for us at Children First, when it came to the fundraising idea, we were coming up with the idea rather than the full picture of what's the supporter journey for people in here, how do we get the income and the money. Well, the problem that we're trying to solve was reaching an audience. Ultimately you want money from that, but lifetime value is also really, really helpful for that as well. So get comfortable with the uncomfortable. If you're not uncomfortable, you're probably not doing it right. So that's and I think the last time is give the process time to breathe and grow. With the way that we did it, by not having the 5 days block together. It had its advantages and disadvantages by not doing that. So focusing on the advantages that we had time to process, reflect, refine, think about things. So yeah, give the time, give the process some time. Make sure that you've got that booked in advance, and you've got the full length of the process thought through about what sessions you're going to be using and when. So you make sure you've got that full time commitment from everybody. So yeah, I think that would be the probably key things for the process.